All right, welcome back. Is there anybody still out there? All right, lots. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to have our next session continuing with the day on cross-border, which, as we've talked about, is the part of the third pillar, which is Mojaloop connecting to other networks. So this whole morning is all about cross-border because that is Mojaloop connecting to other networks, in this case, particularly cross-border other payment networks. And Paul, I should have said as the MC, can I go ahead and get started?
I'm very happy for you to carry on, Steve.
All right, thank you. We've talked about some high-level things in cross-border so far. We've talked about some of the business opportunities, the different components of a cross-border transaction. We've talked about some of the issues of messaging that are going to have to get sorted out with ISO 20022. We've talked about currency conversion, and that's brought into settlement. And now we're going to talk about a POC that some of the members of the community are doing, which is actually to test very specific components of a cross-border transaction using IPS systems. So with that, the first person I'm going to introduce is going to be Ni. Ni, CEO of ThitsWorks. If anyone doesn't know him yet, you probably should by now. ThitsWorks is the hub operator for WinePay. They're currently working with over 70 MFIs in the various components of their business, focused on digitizing institutions that serve the last mile. So with that, Ni, I'd like to introduce the project, if you would, and then
thank you, Steve. Let me use the other slide. So I'm going to be very quick because Steve has quite a lot of discussion questions that we'll be happy to go through, and also expect you to have some questions regarding that. I will introduce the project in three components. One, the participants of the proof of concept. I think it is correct to say that a project like this, a proof of concept like this, takes almost like a village, to work together. We have 8 organizations working together. It's a consortium of group of companies. ThitsWorks, Mojaloop Foundation, Motorsparks, or now Infotech, right? So as Warren can explain about this rebranding. Visa. Very happy, to have Visa, working with us, based in Singapore, and also, using their network, to do this cross border. And Rapid and Lucy, these are the organizations, again, based in Singapore, and we are focusing on 2 corridors, Myanmar, Singapore to Myanmar corridor, and Singapore to Philippines corridor, and we have also financial institutions in those countries working with us. CV Bank in Myanmar and UBX in Philippines are our partners in those domestic, the leg of this network. So the scope, I'm very, very quick. Scope. There are 3 things that we want to do. One, we want to connect the smaller financial institutions to the instant payment networks, for the cross-border use case. We want to explore the opportunities from the business perspective to make it cheaper and more effective for the migrant workers based in Singapore, to be able to send remittances back home. In this case, 2 corridors from Singapore to Philippines and Singapore to Myanmar. And there are 3 different things that we want to learn from this proof of concept. One, we want to learn more about how to onboard financial institutions to the network. We want to see the compliance and the regulatory requirements, and understand what are the challenges. And also, we want to have the clear understanding of end-to-end the financial flows for this. So this is a proof of concept, under the grant by the Monetary Authority of Singapore, and we are very grateful for that. The objective is to experiment and learn the new technologies, and then disseminate the learnings with the other financial institutions. So we are very happy to be part of that.
All right, thank you very much, Ni. And yeah, I think we're all excited sometimes the only way to learn some of these things is to actually do it and test it and see what works and what doesn't work. And I think we got to hear what Nexus is trying to do, and it's a great initiative. But I think there's going to be a lot of lessons to make sure how does what they're doing reach the last mile that we're trying to reach. I think you guys are are really going after that with this POC. So we appreciate that. I want the other panelists given a chance to introduce themselves, but with that, as well as their organizations and their role in the POC. So we'll start with online. Nat Shear with us again from Visa. You can introduce yourself again, but I think everyone's the same as who was in the room, Nat, so probably no need to. But start off with maybe then what do you see as the value to, what is the value to Visa? What is Visa hoping to learn? What is Visa hoping to see as the value to their business from a POC like this?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So I've introduced myself previously, so we don't need to do that. But the role that Visa is playing in this, I think, is important to consider. So we, and Nee mentioned this in his introduction, Visa operates one of the world's largest digital networks for payment processing. And on that network, we have a lot of different services. We've traditionally designed those services to support our proprietary solutions. And our role in this POC is to provide the network and some of those capabilities on the network in conjunction with our partners to see if we can support more distributed kind of solutions. So not proprietary Visa end-to-end, but how do we participate in a third-party network? So in this case, with the Mojaloop. This gives us a chance to test out some new operating models, some new technology, and gather some lessons learned.
Same question for Warren.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. So I'm Warren Carew. I'm from Infotex, the artist formerly known as Modusbox. So we've changed our branding a little bit, but at the heart we're the same. We're a group of financial inclusion technology experts looking at driving equitable financial service outcomes. And we've been part of the Mojaloop journey for many years now, and we've been working with all of these parties before almost. In particular with Visa last year, we had the privilege of doing a accelerator and a POC program there to actually look at what would it look like to connect Visa network to a Mojaloop network. And that was a great success, and it actually gave us all the encouragement and enthusiasm to try and do this now for real. And actually, because as Steve mentioned, some of the challenges you only realize when you do it. So we're very thankful to have been able to get Works involved in this and supporting the initiative and taking it to the next level of, going from theory to real is really important in everything we do. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And I think that is a good point of, this is part of something we've been working on for a while. And I think that when we first did that POC, it was very much, here's a technology company solving a technology problem. But what we lacked was a hub operator who has to deal with, okay, if you're actually going to make this live, the hub operator has some problems. So now great that Works is there as the hub operator to say, okay, what are the challenges for a Mojaloop hub operator? So that gets to another point of it. It's still just a POC. There's still, as we've heard, this is a complex problem. You're doing a slice of it. What are some things that are out of scope that you think are, they're kind of always weighing on your mind of, but we're not thinking about this yet. So this is a limited POC, we get it, but what are some things that you think, we still haven't thought about that, and it's crucial for this thing to go live? I'm gonna give it to Warren first.
Yeah, so
I'm going to limit Warren to 2 things.
Okay, I think the first thing is because this is a POC, we keep tripping over the fact that, well, we don't have to solve everything. We don't have to solve all the fees. We don't have to solve all the settlement problems on day one of it. And the challenge for that is actually, if you get too tied up in those concerns on day one, you never actually start. So we have to kind of hold back some of these fears and trials and tribulations. And, we remind ourselves that on a weekly basis, usually on the calls, the management calls to say, well, but we're not going to worry about this point right now. Yeah, so I think settlement and fees are big areas for entertainment.
I completely agree with Warren. We definitely want to tackle all the challenges if possible, because right after the POC, we want to go to commercial, initiative. Right? I think everybody who's involved wants to see a commercial, project coming out of this. Right? So there's a, very high interest in that. But if we try to solve everything, we may not, complete right during this, limited duration POC. So the one very clear out of scope item is the commercial discussions around this, right? And that includes the fees and the foreign exchange, and there are different elements that needs to be in place if we are to take it live. So we intentionally agree that the fees and the commercial discussion will be out of scope of this POC. But I have been a part of the discussions where we are actually already having some of the parallel, the talks, right, among the stakeholders.
I want to get back to the fees issue, but I want to give it to Nat because I think there are a number of other things that are out of scope. Nat, any other, besides fees and settlement, anything else that's out of scope that you think is like, well, we need to be thinking about it? Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. Totally agree with both me and previous speakers. But the big one for us is, we're trying to get the service live. And that's a big focus on the technical and the operational issues. But to be truly successful, we need the financial institutions to adopt the service, right? And to get them to adopt it, yes, we definitely need to work out things like commercials, but I think there's also quite a bit around the risk and the compliance issues, which will sit with the users of the system. And we can try to support them when we understand what their concerns are, what their requirements are. We can try to support them from a technical point of view, but ultimately it's going to be the responsibility of the financial institutions to comply with their regulations, and they'll make their own assessments. So I think that's an area that as we move closer to launch, we need to start digging in on a bit more.
All right, I almost would have thought I had primed you for saying that, Nat. Thanks. I mean, as we start thinking about compliance, I do think, and I was hoping that Greg was going to be in the room from the FRMS Center of Excellence, but I think we are looking at some of that, and hopefully that can be brought into this POC when you extend into that. Going back to the commercial thing, I mean, has it been a struggle to get commercial actors to take part in a POC without having defined, like, how do you get people to actually invest their time before you define what their commercial outcomes are going to be? So I'm going to start with Nee on that one.
Right. In our conversations with the partners, and it used to be potential partners, but they are partners now in this POC, the conversation was really easy. Right? I think the business case is very clear. Right? Both Philippines and Myanmar have a lot of migrant workers outside of the country. Myanmar, for example, we have 4.6 million, almost 10% of the population, right, out of the country. Many of them in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, etc. And they are remitting, back home, right? I mean, through different channels, right? So not all of them, right, digitally, right? But definitely the need is there. So the Philippines is the same thing, right? So a lot of the organizations that we have spoken to have a business case already that they're trying to solve. Right? So the conversation was easy. And they understand that the commercial discussions will take some time, and that they are also willing to wait for that to happen, right? So everybody is really interested in having this proof of concept technology. Is very clear, very attractive, right? So we're all trying to make sure that it works. Right? But there's still a lot of challenges that we are trying to fix. So it's not over yet, but the discussions and the traction interest is very clear.
Warren, go ahead. Yeah, we've had a few of these.
Yeah, so I think it is a hard thing to do. Lucy's not, they're a fintech startup. They're trying to get going. They're really keen on growing their service offering and their market share. So everybody is committed to it. We understand, you can have death by POC in a startup land, very easily. So that kind of longer term vision, as Neil was saying about going live, is on the top of everyone's mind. We are making sure while we take the first step, we are on the right path to be live and for this to be turned into a real service. And I think Michael mentioned it earlier around the SDGs and World Bank targets for what remittances should cost. And there's quite a long way to go to get to that level. And we think that this group of partners can actually make that real, that we can get to those kind of targeted levels for remittances.
Okay, I want to come back to that in a bit of how this is going to potentially drive down cost and inclusion. But before that, I want to get into what we're talking about, the challenges. And Nat, I'm going to go to you first. Of what are some of the interesting challenges that you've seen of throughout this process of saying like, oh yeah, to get this interoperable with a group of financial institutions that maybe we wouldn't have normally worked with a network that's outside of the VisaNet. What are some of the interesting challenges you've seen in this that you said, oh wow, yeah, that is something I guess we have to solve and we hadn't thought about it yet?
Well, maybe actually to start, surprisingly, what was easy was the sort of the message translation, like getting systems to talk to one another inherently was perhaps easier than maybe some of us thought to begin with. So I thought that was a pleasant surprise. But what emerges, and I think in a previous session, Michael Richards actually referred to this. It's not necessarily the direct message translation or getting the systems to talk to one another. It's where there's operational differences. And we have noticed that sometimes some systems process or need different bits of information or different data to process the payment. And if information is missing, we have to then do that work to procure that information and get it into the workflow. And that requires changes to various systems. You can't just put some box in between the two and have it talk to one another or have it do direct translation. So I think that's been one of the challenges that's come out. Things like end-to-end transaction IDs, the way in which that is identified and tracked in one system or another. Maybe there's a requirement for a different format for a name or something like this, right? Where there's actually a different piece of information that's needed. So those things have been challenges. I think the moving forward, as I mentioned in my last comment, there might be some new requirements or some new challenges that are presented when we think about actually going live, right? So beyond this POC, and we start moving into the territory of, going through the full risk and compliance kind of regimes, and thinking beyond the core original POC participants, right, who are all really fully bought in, understand what we're trying to accomplish, and have the background. When we try to scale this to the broader industry in a go live scenario, I'm certain that we will face some new challenges.
I appreciate bringing the point of that Michael said, and we all talked about that comment Michael made in one of the breaks. And so very much appreciate your partnership, Nat, because you come from a non-Mojaloop perspective that from an organization that's big enough that we have to comply with the way you do things in order if we want to transact with Visa. And so we very much appreciate your patience in working with Mojaloop to make sure that we are able to talk to other payment systems. You've been a huge asset. So the same question then for, let's go with Warren. What are some of the major challenges you've seen so far in this project that we've overcome, let's say?
Yeah. Well, I agree with Nat. There's been some areas where it's gone nice and smoothly. And my third item I'd have put on the list of things that keep us up at night is really the evolution of the Oracle and the account resolution across worlds. And that's going to be an interesting challenge. But I think this whole program is possible because of the point in time we undertaking it. The great work that that's the Works and the Wine Pay program has actually done to bring together all those multiple endpoints that can extend us down and provide those services down to the last mile and the MFIs. Without that being there as a target, we would lose all the momentum behind the initiative, really. But it's there, it's for the taking. How do we fix the account the account lookup? And just that, well, we have our best minds in this room and around the world actually working on possible scenarios for that. Knees pointing at Michael. Yeah, certainly him and Koan and Thin, I think, have been at the heart of that debate. I think as well, it's fair to say, Nat, that even I understand the account lookup service at Visa has been modified based on our POC we did last year. So it's actually there's real collaboration happening here, and yeah, we've got to comply with Visa, but Visa's not that proud that they not trying to make it all hang together. So thank you very much.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I want to go to another area, but I think that the account lookup and alias resolution, I think, is the big thing that hopefully we'll see published. And I think that would be an amazing thing to get published, because I do think that is a key thing you guys are solving with this. But Warren, you hinted on this again, we talked this morning about Nexus, which again, great initiative, probably focused on banks. How do we make sure that non-banks and small financial institutions are included in the system that Nexus is building? So Nat, because I already know Nee and Warren's opinion on this, I want to hear from Nat on this. Heads up. Why is it so important for us to make sure that those financial institutions, those non-banks, whether MFIs or wallets or and all folks that Visa will probably never be able to have as direct customers, why is it so important for us to make sure that those institutions can participate in this? Or is it not? If you tell me it's a loaded question.
Well, no, I mean, I do think it's important. I mean, for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, we're in a network business, right? And the value of the network increases with the number of participants. So, fundamentally having more endpoints and more people connected, adds value to the entire network and our entire value proposition. And furthermore, to that point, as a business, we all want to meet our customers where they want to be met, right? We want to transact with them within the application that they want to use, through the partner that they want to use, et cetera, right? And so therefore, if there's a preferred way in which consumers are transacting in market, X, Y, or Z, I'm all for having that particular application included in the ecosystem. And I mean, beyond that, I believe everyone has a right to have access to basic financial, services. I think it gets a little more gray and not so black and white when we talk about, kind of what I might call premium services. Does everyone need access to all the services? I don't know. I think it's important that the rules to participate are clear and applied evenly to all institutions. And I think that, as an ecosystem, since we benefit from having, wider inclusion, and we benefit from, those network effects, we also benefit from the development of, specialized service providers and specialized niches. You mentioned that, these might end up being kind of new participants that Visa hasn't had, access to before. Therefore, I think that the ecosystem should also provide various different ways, right? So, I'm thinking about non-settling institutions that can participate through a sponsor. That's those sorts of arrangements I think are important and to ensure the diversity of the ecosystem.
I hope everyone was listening to that to understand that, believe it or not, Visa is not that far away from some of our philosophies. So thank you, Nat, for saying all that. I want to turn it to Nee for the one last quick question, then I want to see if there's any questions in the audience. But when we look, I mean, this is really focused on wallets initially, but you guys have a lot of experience with MFIs beyond the regulatory, because yeah, currently MFIs in Myanmar are not allowed to participate in this. Beyond the regulatory, what are the major challenges that small financial institutions are going to face to try to participate in what you're doing?
I think one clear area is cost. Right? I think the smaller institutions have a very low margin, so they are, operating, at a, very thin margins, right, to cover their costs, right. So they are very price sensitive, and participating in this kind of network requires investment, resources, and some of the technical capacities that they currently don't have. So that has always been a bottleneck, and that's why we're very thankful for the Mojaloop, the platform and the community, the technology, without which, right, we won't be able to actually invite them, right, to participate in this kind of instant payment switch, right? So we're very, very happy that we are able to do that. We already see a big traction from the MFI industry in Myanmar, right? So we have 20 MFIs who signed up a little commitment to join WinePay, WineGo's Life. And these 20 MFIs, right, represent about 50% of the industry, and that's a very clear sign that there's attraction. But they won't be able to do that without a platform like this. So one is very, very clear cost, and another thing is that we also need technology partners who are willing and able to work with them. There's a lot of need for hand-holding, right? Working with them, making sure that they also have incentives, right, to join. Right? So they are, champions, right, in MFIs, right? But we need to make sure that the whole industry is on board.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I think going back to what Nat said on that, we haven't really looked at risk and fraud and some of those other issues and compliance. I do think that's going to be an area where it's going to be a whole new layer of costs that and technical expertise that they're not ready for. So as a community, the more that we can start thinking about how do we build tools that allow them to not just participate in P2P, but also participate in more complex transactions but have the tools available for them. So again, hopefully Greg listens to the recording of this and can see that there's a market need for that. At this point, we've just got a few minutes left. And so I do want to open up and see if there's any questions about this POC from the audience. Anyone? Michael, any comments? You've been working on it as well? Okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Never mind. Oh, please. Yay.
Thank you. This might be not a very smart question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do the corridors imply bidirectional? Probably do, right? So Singapore to Philippines, and Philippines to Singapore. Does that imply Myanmar to Philippines then, or not necessarily in this initial POC?
Steve, you want me to answer?
No, go ahead.
Okay, all right. So for this POC, right, it's limited to 2 corridors, and it's only one direction, from Singapore to Philippines and Singapore to Myanmar, and not vice versa. Right? So there are a lot of technologies and the components that Michael and Al will talk about, right, that we're trying to solve. Right?
Okay, we have another question.
Sorry, can I just supplement that? I mean, I think the point that Sally was making, if I'm correct, is would it be possible in a situation like this for a remittance from Myanmar to be directed to an institution in the Philippines? And I think our answer is, in principle, yes, it would be, but that's not within the scope of this, as you say, not within the scope of this POC.
Thank you, Mike.
Hi, I'm Elijah. So my question goes to Watkins. You talked about account lookup being a problem for the integration between Mojaloop and Visa. So what exactly is the problem? Is it technical? Is it a political issue? Or, just please elaborate so that I can understand.
Okay, I'm going to defer the answer to that because I think Michael and Ang are going to talk about it in the next presentation. Okay.
I would just say though that I don't think it was political. I think I would just say in that if I can just say Visa and the team have been very, very open about all of the APIs. And so I don't think there's any politics involved at all.
Yeah, it's genuinely a multi-endpoint or multiple resolution problem. It's just a real thing.
I can just give you, 2 seconds answer, right? So we have in Myanmar, right, we have one SIM number tied to multiple wallets, right? So we need to resolve, when someone use an alias as a phone number as an alias, right? We need to know which wallet, right, it should go to, right? So we are trying to solve this right through this oracle, and Michael and Alan will talk about some of the thinkings that we have. Some are long-term solution, and maybe some short-term solutions that we need to find.
Okay.
Can I make a point of that?
Yep, go ahead.
I wrote down the quote from Warren earlier: "Evolution of the Oracle across worlds," and I'd actually like to highlight that has applicability well beyond merely the mere idea of remittances, but we actually need that across, for example, the integration across digital public good projects. So there is a general need for some, I think, new thinking around oracles and peering of oracles and the resolution of oracles from one oracle to the next. So yeah, I very much welcome those comments. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Paul. That was a good one. We have one more question from Julie.
One question regarding actually how you're planning to market this. And I'm for example, generally thinking of Singapore to the Philippines flow, right? So if you look at what is the solution being used today, it's often Western Union that is effectively used to effectively remit this money. And if you look at actually the users, often there is a need for more financial education to understand actually there is a different solution, and you should also use this solution. Have you already tackled this type of question in your marketing strategy within the POC?
It's in the scope of the POC, but that's not the technical aspect, right? So we are looking at this. We are studying the market. How Lucy, our partner in Singapore, is servicing their users and clients, and we have a reference point on how much they are currently paying, right, for the remittances. And so one of the objectives of this POC is to make the cross-border remittance more inclusive and also cheaper and more effective. So definitely your question is definitely there, but we have not concluded that analysis. But we definitely want to do that in this POC.
Okay, we have to wrap this up. I would like to first and foremost thank once again Nat for being with us today. You've been an amazing partner at Visa over a long journey, and we very much look forward to deepening and expanding that partnership with Visa over the coming years. So thank you so much, Nat, for joining us. And we also fully expect you're going to be with us in person for the next one. And everyone's looking forward to finally meeting you in person.